got a very special person with us. Many of you guys might know this individual from the various conferences and conventions that he does all around the nation. So Bob Copper is the founder of Self-Storage 101, the industry's leading consultancy firm specializing in development and market feasibility, operational improvement, and marketing implementation. Bob has worked with hundreds of independent owners and operators to assist in making informed and profitable decisions in all aspects of self-storage. Bob has developed, owned, and managed his own facilities, which gives him a very unique perspective that easily relates to those operators he has consulted with over the years. Bob and his team at Self-Storage 101 specialize in market feasibility studies, acquisition due diligence projects, facility operational auditing, owner, operator, and manager training. Bob has authored several highly popular books and training manuals related to self-storage and is a regular contributor to most of the industry trade journals. He's also a regular speaker at national, regional, and local self-storage meetings and conventions. And everyone help me welcome to the club, Mr. Bob Copper.
Wow. Wow. Brandon, that sounds like something. That sounds like something my mom wrote. That's pretty good. Pretty good. And I do recognize some of the people on here. Clearly, your standards are not that high to whoever you let in this room.
I got you, man. How are you doing, Bob?
I'm good, really good. Yeah, keeping busy and living the life, living the dream, the self-storage dream.
Yeah, self-storage dream. Also living the grandparent dream. So talk about
Oh yeah,
how many grandkids are you at now?
seven,
Seven. Boys,
seven
girls.
from 6 boys, 1 girl, from the age of 14 to 22.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
And you just had one graduate from which college?
Auburn, Auburn.
Auburn. Okay. I
Yeah.
assume you're Auburn alum.
I am not, but all my wife's 2 sons are. I'm
Okay.
not from Birmingham. I'm not from Alabama. So, the first thing when you move to Alabama, they ask you 2 questions. What church do you go to? And is it Auburn, Alabama? And you have to pick. You have to pick. You can't just say I don't care. And so I actually like them both to win. I like as long as the championships come to the state of Alabama, I'm
Right.
good with that. But
Okay.
and my only dilemma is when they play each other. Then I kind of have to pick. So, but if you came to my house, you'd see mostly Auburn stuff here because of the grandkids. Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Well, hey, Bob, we appreciate your time. And Bob is one of the probably not one, he's probably the expert and the go-to guy when it comes to feasibility studies, market studies. Also, Bob was his company, Copper Self-Storage Management, was one of the first companies that I saw maybe about 7 to 10 years ago that offered third-party management services under the unmanned and remote management structure. So very happy to talk with Bob. First, we're going to talk about some feasibility studies. So Bob, as far as a feasibility study, like what exactly is a feasibility study, and then why is it important for storage investors to get one if they're looking to build or buy an existing
Sure.
storage?
Sure. Well, a feasibility study or market study, whichever version of study that somebody gets, is an independent third party who doesn't have a vested interest in you buying it or not, can take a look at it and see things that you might not have noticed. For example, Brandon, if you came to my house here in Birmingham, where I've been for 7 years, you'd notice things I don't notice because this is my house.
Right.
I'm used to it. So having somebody come in and look at it that's not you makes a lot of sense. Usually, feasibility study people have access to databases that you don't have access to,
Right.
knowledge that you might, just experience. So it's about as cheap an insurance policy as you can get
I got you.
when it comes to storage because of everything you're going to have to invest in if you decide to build or buy one. The feasibility study, and Mark says, is the cheapest thing you're going to start with to give you some direction of whether you should do it or not. And if you should, what should you do about it? And so that's why we're by far the largest provider. We do 30 to 40 of them every single month and have for years.
Yeah.
We do them for banks. A lot of banks recommend us because they know we tell people don't do it a lot. And
Yeah.
so that's why we do them for a lot of the big companies. But that's what a study is having an independent third party check it that they see things that it's just cheap insurance for you to before you make that big investment that has a lot of zeros in it.
Yeah. So what do you think would be the biggest mistake somebody makes if they decide, you know what, I'm not gonna contact Bob and get a feasibility study. I'm just gonna go for it. What do you think is the biggest mistake?
Well, a couple things. One is unless you've got your own financial wherewithal or you've got enough friends and family, you're not going to be able to get a bank loan without one, probably. And so you're going to have one probably either way.
Yeah.
But that being said, the biggest mistake people make is I'd say two things. One is they fall in love with the site too much. Years ago, there
Yeah.
was a guy in our business named Buzz Victor who was been in business a long time when I got in the 90s. And he always used to say the worst place you could ever build is on a piece of property you already own because you've already decided you're going to put one there, whether you should or not. So that's the
Yeah.
mistake people make is they fall in love with the site. And I think the second thing that people make a mistake on is thinking there's one thing that is a yes or no and going that way. And I'll throw that in as a caveat. The biggest mistake people make is getting advice off Facebook and listening to people on Facebook it's dangerous what some of the people say on Facebook, and it's staggering to me that people would listen to that because the site matters, the market matters, the rental rates matter a lot.
Right.
People call me all the time, say I've got this site, and they'll give me some information. I say, well, what about this? Well, I didn't check that. That matters, whatever that is. And so there's more to it. This isn't like buying $50,000 houses and flipping them.
Yeah.
This is a lot bigger investment. It's a better investment, in my opinion. It's hard to beat storage,
Yeah.
but a lot of zeros involved. And so people have to make sure. I mean, I don't even change oil in my own car because I don't know how to do that. And so, getting someone to look at it again, it's true, but that's the biggest mistake is people make is they fall in love with the site without
Yeah.
realizing what's going on around it.
That is true, man. I actually have a deal where I fell in love with the site and the structure of the deal that the seller was offering me. Some great seller financing, but yeah, the market around it wasn't too hot. And
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah. I looked at one just this morning where a guy likes the site. We looked at the market. He did not realize that there were three other self-storage properties in development around him that once they got built, the market would be way overbuilt.
yeah,
And a lot of people wouldn't know to even know where to look for that information. So you got to make sure you don't buy stuff in a vacuum, whether you're buying existing or you're building a new one. You look if you do it in a vacuum without looking at everything, it can be a very expensive mistake.
yeah. What are some red flags you think that in your, as you are putting together a feasibility study, which you're gonna at some point you're gonna show us one. What do you think are the
Yeah.
red flags that say, you know what, this is not a good market, don't do it?
Well, a couple things. One is red flags would be if the occupancies in the general area aren't high, you're not going to make that better by adding another facility. So you got
Even
to
if it's
check
a
that.
beautiful climate control, that's not gonna.
It is not because you got to keep in mind right now in the history of our business, the most important thing that matters to people is price. If you look at any of the self-storage almanac, and that's because now instead of people going to a facility, interacting with a manager, getting a great sales presentation or not, now they do it all online. And if
Yeah,
you go online, all you know is what the prices are. And so price matters more than it ever did. So in a general market, if the occupancy levels are in the 70s, for example, you adding more space to the market will only make that worse, not better. Now, are there ways to mitigate that? Sure. Maybe your property is in one part of the market and all the competitors are over here. Well, then you may cut off enough traffic to warrant it up here. So that there are ways to mitigate that. But the biggest red flag, Brandon, are rental rates.
yeah,
People don't understand that in the day's world of what it costs to build today, you've got to get much higher rates than they did 20 years ago. And so people go into a market, and we see this all the time where everybody's full, they got waiting lists, but the rental rates are so low that might be a good market to buy in, but not build in. You can't
Right.
build a $40 10 by 10. I can buy a $40 10 by 10. I don't mind buying one, but I can't build one. And people seem to think
Yeah.
that the average rate's $40 for a 10 by 10. Well, my new space, I can get $100 for it. You can't. That's impossible. You might get 50, you might get something above the market, but a nice new shining toy can't get triple the going rate. So the number one reason we tell people not to build in feasibility studies is the rate's too low. Nothing we can do about that. I
Yeah.
can mitigate a bad location. I can mitigate a market that's overbuilt. I cannot mitigate rental rate. There's no way to fix that. So that's the main thing. People call me all the time and say, look, I just checked, all competitors are full. Well, what are the rates? Well, $40. I don't care if the land's free. You're not going to make money at $40 and so you need to
Right.
move on. Now, maybe you should try to buy one of those competitors. I love buying $40 10 by 10s
Yep.
because those
Yep.
people get a rate increase next week after we buy.
Yeah.
But you can't build in that market. So people have to understand the economics a little better.
What do you mean by you say you can mitigate an oversupplied market? What do you mean by that?
Mitigate a couple, that's a good point. Mitigate a couple ways. One is the location. For example, let's say you've got 10 competitors in your market and they're all clustered over here, and yours is going over here where all the new houses are. Well,
Okay.
I can mitigate that because you're going to be capturing a part of the market that these 10 are sharing. Now, if you're putting yours right in the middle of the other 10, then I can't mitigate that.
Okay.
Keep in mind. So sometimes you can mitigate it because all the ones over here, none of them have climate control, and you will. So there's a way to mitigate oversupply, but it's still got to be reconciled with the rental rates. Whether it's undersupplied or oversupplied, if the rates are too low, there's no way to mitigate that. I can even mitigate a bad location because the most important location in business today is the first page of Google, not Main Street. So you can have a crappy location because most people now start their self-storage journey online, not by coming to the facility. So if they
Yeah.
go online and put in self-storage near me, and you're the
Yep.
first one or second
Yep.
one on the list, and they rent from you online, then they go find your facility. It doesn't really matter if your facility is not right on Main Street anymore because that's not where they started. So I can mitigate a bad location. I mitigate overdevelopment. I cannot mitigate low rental rates.
I got you. Okay. Is there like a minimum? Because I have some buyers that I work with where they say, hey, I need a minimum of 50,000 within the 5 mile radius, and I need
Right.
household income of X. Is there kind of minimum trade area, household income, population that someone should look at when they're buying or building a site?
Well, there are some extremes. For example, you mentioned income levels. There are extremes on both ends where storage doesn't work very well. In very, very low income and very, very high. And it's because very, very low income makes sense, right? They just can't afford, they're not going to have it. And very, very high income, people live in 10,000 square foot houses, aren't going to rent storage either.
Right.
So it's that
Like middle
middle,
class.
it's middle class,
Okay.
both high and low, that works the best for us. So that's what from an income standpoint, that's what I'm looking at. But again, keep in mind, if the rental rates in the market are high, it doesn't matter what the incomes are because people are paying those rates. So you can't get too caught up in the income if the rental rates matter. On as far as a population, it doesn't matter as much as how much competition is there. For example, you can
Yeah.
go to,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
if you're in a town of 10,000 people, that that means there's enough demand there for about 80,000 square feet.
Right.
Well, if there's already 80,000 square feet, then you probably don't want to add more. If there's only 40,000, then there's enough room for more. So it really depends on what's there already. The number of people in general isn't as important as what's there existing because you can't
Yeah.
you can't
That's
add too much to market. The other thing you got to be careful about is you can't overwhelm the market. For example, if the rates are pretty decent, occupancies are decent, and the average size is 20,000, and you want to add 100,000, well, then that market will collapse when you open. So you got to be careful about how much you add to a market. You can't add, 100% to a market. You can maybe add 10 or 20%, depending on different factors. So you got to be careful about how much you want to add, because sometimes people say, well, I have to add 100 to make the numbers work. Well, then don't build it because that market
yeah.
can't stay 100,000 square feet. If you're the only 100,000 square foot facility, a market full of 20,000s, you're going to get destroyed.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, so, but before we go on, anyone out there got any questions for Bob? And Bob, what I'd like to do after we get some questions is have you share your screen so you can walk us through like one of your sample feasibility
Sure,
studies and show us kind of what you put in there, what we should be looking for in the feasibility study.
sure.
But just want to before we just want to open it up to anyone out there. Anyone wants to got a question you want to put in the chat or a question that you want to ask Bob here online. Okay,
I can't believe
all
Terry
those fingers are
Campbell doesn't have some smart aleck question to ask.
I've been around you long enough. I know everything already. So.
Okay, I got you.
uh, I have a question while folks are typing. Oh, let me see. Here we go. Rodney Thomas said you mentioned buying versus or building versus buying in a market. Please
Yeah,
elaborate. Okay.
sure. Yeah, for example, that's a good question because that comes up a lot with us. If I'm in a market where, again, everybody's pretty full, rates, occupancies are good, maybe there's a wait list, there's not a bunch of new supply in the pipeline, and the rates are $40. I cannot build in a $40 market. It's impossible. But I can buy in a $40 market because there you're only buying the income it generates.
Okay.
So if I'm buying a $40 10 by 10, I don't mind that because those people will get rate increases after I buy it, and I can immediately increase revenue pretty quickly. You take a facility and go from 40 to 50, you've already increased the value some percentage based on the size. So there are like a lot of times when we do feasibility studies for people, our analysis would be is you can't build there, but if I were you, I would contact all those sellers, see if anybody
Yep.
wants to sell
Yep.
because
Yep.
they're poorly managed. The rates are terrible. They don't have a sense to raise their rates. They have no tenant insurance. They don't even have websites. You want to buy one of those places, but you can't build in a market. So that's the difference between a buy versus build is the rates may not be high enough to build, but the property might be advantage to buy because the market dictates what that's worth.
That's actually a good point, Bob, because that we just bought one 2 weeks ago. We closed escrow. Another one in Macomb, Mississippi. It's
Oh yeah.
south of where we have ours out in Brookhaven. And I think you're nearby. You're in Columbia,
We,
right?
we've got quite a few in Mississippi. Yeah.
Yeah. And we bought this one. It's over 11,000 square feet. We bought it for 265,000. So it's
Wow.
very low per foot.
You
So
couldn't build it for that. That's
no,
for sure.
no. To build it would be what, six in that market, what, 60 a foot? You
At
think?
least, at least, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
All
you'd have
right.
to buy the land.
You're right, exactly. Yeah, that's assuming you
Yeah.
own the land. Yeah. Nicole out of Twin Falls, she has a question. I'm looking at a deal that is one of two facilities in the town of about 3,000 people. Do you still recommend a feasibility study, high occupancy, the 90s?
If you're buying existing, the only reason you would want to do a feasibility study would be two reasons. One, if your bank requires it. If your bank requires you to do some kind of financial analysis, in this case, they probably won't. It might be small enough, and you may have enough of a relationship with your bank you don't need to. So if you don't need it, don't. The only time we really recommend acquisition when you do acquisition feasibility studies, or at least a market study, is to make sure you're not buying in a vacuum. Because you sometimes people buy in a vacuum because they looked at the facility, but they didn't realize there's 12 more being built in the market. They didn't realize that there's a bunch of going on. They don't realize the population is declining without doing some study. So I would at least do some basic research to make sure there aren't any negative things getting ready to happen in that market. But if not, I would say if you don't need a bank doesn't need you to provide anything, you probably don't need it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or probably like kind of like what you were saying. If it's a new market that you're entering in and you're kind of unsure about it, then it might make
Probably
sense.
wouldn't hurt. Again, you need to make sure population isn't declining. Make sure check the pipeline. Make sure there are other facilities being built in that size town. They probably are not. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but that'd be at least something to maybe go to the local planning and zoning meeting and ask them, is there any other self-storage properties being built in the pipeline, just to make sure, because in that small of a market, one more being built could have an impact.
Yeah. Well, good question. Hey, Bob, can you share your screen? Just
I
click the
can.
share screen, and then I'll approve of it, so that way you can share walk us through your feasibility study.
Yep. Let's see here. You got to do something. It keeps telling me you've disabled that.
Oh, did I? Oh, no. Hold on. Share settings. Let's see. Okay, click it again, and it should send me a message to click OK and allow you to share. Those tools.
Yeah, I keep getting host disabled,
Wait,
participant
hold on.
screen
Hold on.
sharing.
Okay, here we go. All participants who can share when someone else is share.
Okay.
All right,
Don't
try it
let
again.
Terry Campbell share.
No, no.
That's going to be dangerous. Okay, here we go.
There you go.
So do you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it. Pre-development self-storage site. Looks like it's in, let me make sure I got it right. Sioux City, Iowa.
Yeah. Who knows where this is? This is just a sample when we just
Okay.
put together. So yeah, what you're seeing here, we do two different levels of studies, and we do a what we call a desktop market study, and then we do a full bank package feasibility study, which is what you're seeing here. So both studies have the market information, so you'll see that, and then this one adds in all the detailed financial analysis that a bank typically needs to give you a bank loan. And so we always have some general information about the industry because again, we don't know who's reading this or if you're sharing it with your friends and family. So we put information, but basically the main pages in here are these couple here where we basically say, whether you should do it or not. This is what this is saying here. And then the rest of the 100 pages are all the detailed that support this information. So you can see here, we've got a property here that in this case, this property worth about 4.9 million at stabilization. Here's what the returns are on this particular project, based on what this customer is building. Then we talk about, what kind of market it is and stuff. So really feasibility study, Brandon, is kind of based on three things. It's based on the market. I mean, on the site. So the first thing we explore is the site itself. Is this site one that makes sense? So you'll see we're looking at site. We look at how does the road look? Because people got to be able to get to it, right? How does it fit in the market? What kind of accessibility does it have? What kind of traffic count is around it? Do you have enough cars coming by there? So that's the first thing we're looking at. Does the site itself make sense? And this is in both studies, by the way. Right. Very rarely, Brandon, do we tell somebody not to build based on the market, on the site, because like I said before, even a bad site can be mitigated by the other factors. So the site itself isn't overly important, but it is something we want to look at. The next thing we look at is the market itself. What kind of market are you looking at here? So we'll do the demographics. And so we start with a baseline, assuming that a market is a 3-mile market. The self-storage industry tells us that most people store within 3 miles of home. And so that's our baseline. And then we adjust that based on every individual site. For example, if we do one in Manhattan, you can't go 3 miles because then you're well into New Jersey and they don't match. So in Manhattan, it might be 3 blocks. Where in a more rural area, it might be 5 miles. So that's adjusted each one separately. So, and then we talk about the demographics. As we can see here, that it's increasing. We can see that the incomes are decent here. We can see what the density goes. And this is really the main things. I've seen people get a feasibility study, Brandon, that was 30 pages. 20 of it was a demographic report.
Wow.
It is totally useless.
Yeah.
You don't need to know all that. You need to know what the incomes are, if it's density, and whether it's growing or not. The rest of it is not overly important. But so that's why we don't like wasting our folks' time reading 20 pages of something that's not relevant. So that's what you see here. And we do a little market information about what's going on in general in that market. And then we look at the neighborhood. What's going on in that neighborhood? Is it vibrant? There's a bunch of empty buildings, so we want to know what's going on there. We look and see, you got any new housing being built around you, because that obviously matters. And so we're going to document that. Here's a list of some new housing developments that we found that are going around within that 3-mile market going on. And then we start on the competitor. So you start with a site. And does the site work at all? And the next thing, all right, let's look at the competition, what's going on there. So you can see here, we've mapped the competition. And then we do a profile on every competitor. This is general information about storage. But we do a profile, as you can see, on every competitor, when they were built. occupancy range, what their size are, and then general information. So you kind of know what you're up against, as far as the competition, because that matters. I mean, if they're getting $40 for a 10 by 10 right down the road, that needs to concern us because you're not going to be able to do a lot with that. So we're going to document every competitor. We make phone calls. We check websites and document all that we find in that regard. And again, we subscribe to some very expensive databases where we get stuff like when they were built and the size, and we get that from a database that we subscribe to. A lot of people in the industry subscribe to. So we're going to do the competition. So make sure, and I mentioned that baseline of 3 miles. We also base that on number of competitors. For example, I looked at one this morning that looked at 3 miles, and in 3 miles there were 27 competitors. Well, that's not a 3 mile market because nobody's going to drive past 27 places to get to you. No. So it's a lot smaller market. We also expand it again if there's only 3 competitors in 3 miles, and we may go out farther because you kind of have to know what you're up against. We also check a database. Here's one you can see. There's a new one that's already been permitted, and so again, that's based into our analysis, or we know this one's coming. And you see this when we see where it says it's permitted. Once it says permitted, then that's pretty close to 100% chance that one's getting built. Right. Now, sometimes they'll say planning, sometimes they'll say zoning, sometimes they'll say different things. If it says planning, probably 50-50 shot it's going to get built. But if it says permitted or under construction, then that's a different go. So we do designate which one it is.
So now if it's permitted, you have to make that as part of your square foot per capita.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, if it's permitted, could it still not get built? Sure, but it's probably going to get built because they've gone to that trouble. And then we talk about the demand section. Now, here's one thing that I will tell you that I think that people get tripped up on, and where one of those danger zones are on Facebook, which is that the actual demand calculations are the be all and end all, and they frankly are not. So we look at demand 2 ways, empirically and anecdotally. So empirically, we look at it. We actually do these calculations you can see here. And you can see this one is showing that in the 3 miles, that market in the green means it's underdeveloped by 112,000 square feet. Right. And we base that on, here's the population, then the number of facilities and how much square footage is there already, and then what that is per square footage. And using a equilibrium of 7.5, that means this market's underdeveloped by this amount of square footage. And in this case, we have used that one that's in permitting, so we're accounting for that.
Right.
So assuming that one gets built, then this market is underdeveloped by 112,000. So that's what we're looking at. But that is only one piece of it. Of more concern about, or more important to us, is the occupancy levels. And we know from the phone calls and checking websites that everybody in this market was pretty highly occupied. That is way more important than what those green and red numbers mean. But we look at both because people expect to see both, and it can tell us some things. But in the list of things that are really important, this right here is not on the top 10. But it's there because people need to see it, and at least we know what's going on. So we are much more important to see what's going on. And here we saw that everybody's pretty highly occupied. And so we know there's room. It's just how much. The main number that I'm looking at on this page right here, Brandon, is that 265,000 square feet of what's existing, and to make sure that we're not building too much more back.
Right.
So for example, if there's 265,000 here, well, to build 100,000 would be a 40% increase. That's too much. And so we would look at this number to make sure we're not adding too much to a market that we don't want to overwhelm the market. So we've looked at that, and we've got other information from our database we put in here about what's going on in the market. And then it comes down to economics. And so then you got to go, all right, so in this case, you can see here's what the rates were in this market. You remember I said something about you can mitigate sometimes an overbuilt market?
Yes.
For example, here you can see that all the competitors have non-climate space, right? You see everybody's got a rate for 5 by 10, for example. Mm-hmm. But you look at the next one, only one competitor is climate space. So if I'm in a market like this where everybody's got non-climate, and let's say the rates were on the lower end, or they were overdeveloped, but I'm getting $120 for a 10 by 10 climate versus 80 then I can mitigate that by just build climate control, because you can tell that's what people are wanting. Particularly, you got this one competitor called Elite Storage that has both. and look at the difference between their climate, non-climate rates. They're getting that rate. So I'm going to build all climate here, probably. I'm assuming that's what the client wanted to build. So that's how we would mitigate that too. It's like, look, you're not going to be competing with 7 competitors. You're going to be competing with 1.
Right.
So that would help mitigate the other potential factors. We also do some dynamic. All right, what have the rates been doing in the market? Are they been going up or down? I will tell you, Brandon, I've been doing this, since the 90s, and in the last, this chart you see on here where this kind of went like that. You see these going down?
Yeah.
From 22 and 23, every market looks like this.
Yeah. I have a question for
New York
you.
looks like this, and small town Alabama looks like this.
I had a question. So since you've been in since the 90s, because I've heard from some of the other folks that own, they're like you, they're institutional folks in the market. They are saying that this market we've been in the last 24 months has been the worst they've seen in their 20, 30 years in the business. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say the worst. I think 08, 7, 8, 9 were worse.
Okay.
But the problem is that we all have a short memory. I have seen word 07, 08 was worse. The problem is, Brandon, we're comparing this to right here, which was COVID.
Yeah.
COVID was such an anomaly, such an anomaly that you can't compare it, because look where we are right here. Well, look over here. It wasn't that far off.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, if I'm looking at 2018 and 19 versus 25 and 26, it's not that different. It's right here's the problem where everybody's comparing it to this. And if you compare it to 21 and 22, and a lot of people did, we're actually involved in a couple of lawsuits, not being sued, but as expert witnesses in lawsuits between developers, builders, some management companies, because their pro forma was based on 22 and the reality is based on 26, and everybody's suing each other because nobody can make their mortgage payments because they based their numbers on 22. And that's so, but so I wouldn't agree, Brandon, it's the worst, because you can see that's just maybe not true. But it's definitely off. And I think that it breeds more. That's why I think right now we're in much more of a buying market than a building market. I think it's safer, less risky. Building right now is a risky proposition because too much can change in the year or two it takes you to build. Where you can buy one and it's based on current performance, and so you're buying what the performance is. You never want to buy on pro forma what they think it'll be in 2 years, because that's not fair. You buy it on current your basic performance, then you're fine. But a lot of the phone calls we get are, I want to get into business. What's the best way to get into it? And 99% of the time is buy an existing facility. Don't build one. It's too risky, takes forever, and it's very difficult. So anyway, you can see here that while I would say it's not the worst, it's not great, but I wouldn't call it the worst, but it's not much different than 5 years ago. So, so here's where we did a recommend units. This is apparently what the client wanted to build. We wouldn't necessarily recommend all that non-climate, but again, that's what they wanted. So we created a unit mix. This is specifically what they wanted. We do unit mixes a couple ways. Sometimes they have a specific unit mix, and this person did. So you can see we did exactly by the book what they wanted. Sometimes they want to build 50,000, but they don't have a unit mix. So we'll create a unit mix based on density and income levels, because those do matter when it comes to creating a unit mix. And then lastly, sometimes they say, I got 4 acres of land, tell me what to build. And so we'll do that. So really, and we do all those versions, really depends on what somebody asks us to do. And so in this case, they did that. And then we just said, all right, here's what, based on the market, here's what those rates look like. Look at the difference though. You see why I would recommend climate versus non-climate? Look at that. $15 for climate, $8 for non-climate. So we probably had a discussion with him after the fact, said, you need to build all climate. And I don't remember this being a specific study, but that gives you an idea of why the difference between those two. And so you ended up with a blended rate of only $10, which is on the lower end, frankly, of what it takes. So we've talked about the site. We looked at the market, and then you got to look at the economics. Does the site make sense from is it going to make money, right? At the end of the day, we got to know, will it make money? And so here's when we start talking about that, where we take, you've got over here what the unit mix creates. Then we put in these assumptions of what the interest rates look like, what the occupancy will look like at stabilization, what the expenses will look like. So we create this, and then here's an estimated budget for that facility. This is based on, again, sometimes we say it's going to be $80 a foot for square footage. In this case, the developer gave us their budget of 2.5 million. So that's what you see there. Again, we do it whatever version it needs to take. So you can see that's their budget. And then once you do that, then you have to go in and create the financial statements that in the end of the day doesn't matter. So we actually do 7 years of income statement. You can see the lease up going right along.
What do you think, Bob? What are you seeing for lease up period in today's market?
Slow.
30, yeah.
Slow. I mean, and Brandon, if you're building 10,000 versus 100,000, that does matter.
Okay.
Number of units matters really as much as anything. So, but it's slower than it was, during COVID, clearly. And that's one of the slower things we're seeing now and it's really because the major driving factor of why people use self-storage is they're moving.
Yeah.
Okay. They use it for businesses. They use it for, they rent a room with the house. But the major dynamic thing, the 30-legged stool, that third leg is missing. People aren't moving because think about it. My son, for example, has a 2% mortgage on his house. He's not going to move. No. Or you got people that aren't going to do a 6 or 7% mortgage, although old people like Terry and I remember when mortgages were way higher than that, and 6 and 7% is really cheap money still. But when people were used to 2%, it's hard to make people convince them that, look, a 6% mortgage is still pretty good money. So nobody's moving. And so that's the dynamic why lease up is so much slower, because nobody's moving. Okay. So we need interest rates to come down some. And I think most people think they will later this year, first of next year. So we'll see that dynamic pick up. But lease up is slower. Again, it depends on how much the market's underdeveloped and all that. We used to budget, I remember years ago, we'd budget like 4% a month at Public Storage with them. Those days are long over. We don't see that really anymore. I look at, multiple pro formas from Extra Space, CubeSmart, Public Storage every week, because we do a lot of work for them, for their clients, and they're much slower than they were 5 years ago. They're much more conservative. Rates, discounting is much higher. And so that's just a reality of where we are now. That's why, again, it takes more to build than it should. But you'll see that, you see here the property's finally getting stabilized, and then here it's fully stabilized. You can also see we bake in increases. For example, you can see here the gross potential is 478. Here it's up to 497. Here it's up to 517, because we're anticipating 4% in this case. And every site's a little different, but 4 is pretty standard. And you can see what it looks like on a yearly basis. So all that gets chimed into the main pages that the bank wants to see, which is this one right here. And Terry, who used to be at Live Oak, can attest this one jumps out at him, because most banks, especially SBA loans, are based on cash flow and when do they cash flow. For example, if you're going to do an SBA loan, the one red line in the sand they have is, does it break even by the 24th month of operation? What that means is that in this year 3, by the end of year 3, so if I go back up here to the end of year 3, which is the 24th month of operation, keep in mind, because we expect year 1 to be construction. So at this point right here, if you're getting an SBA loan, that number right there, that $21,632 has to pay your debt service.
Yeah.
If you're getting an SBA loan. And then this number, by this time, has to provide like a 1.2 or 3 debt coverage ratio. These are SBA requirements. It may not be your local bank, but that's what we're looking at, which is why at the end of the day, when we come back over here to these returns, is that's the main issue here, is does it cash flow? You see this one provides for a refinance at some point where you can pull some money out. You can see we do that. And so that being said, and every investor is different. For example, some investors only look at this levered return, that 15.1. That means It's the return on investment on your investment, not the bank's debt.
Right.
The unlevered one is the debt. So most people don't care. I don't care what the bank. I just want to know if I'm making money on my money. And so in this case, that's what that says. Some investors are only interested in yield, which basically means that their yield on the cost of building it. So that's what you see there. And then a lot of investors, me included, are mostly interested in my cash on cash, which is over here on the far right. And they want to know is if I put $1 in, how much is my dollar making? And that's what you see there, that you want it, the cash on cash. So that's what you see here. And then the rest of this is, who to call for getting signed and who to call for management. That's what the rest of this is. Because again, people need all these other, things, it's information. So that's what you see here. But that's what a feasibility study looks like. The difference between this study and the desktop we do is the desktop does not have all that detailed financial analysis a bank needs. It has all the other stuff, but just not the bank, the 7 years of income statements, all that, because we do the desktop study is designed to tell people this project works or it doesn't. You don't need to do a feasibility study if it doesn't work anyway. And so that's why people start with that one, because there's no point doing the full study. Nothing worse than paying for this study right here to be told don't do it. It's a dumb idea. So always do the desktop first. We also do a lot of desktop studies for acquisitions, for what we talked about before, which was if you're buying existing, you kind of need to know what's going around the market. If all you're looking at is your site specifically and you think look, I got a great deal that's probably only 50% full and I can really fix it. Are you sure about that? Because if everybody's 50% full, you can't fix that. Yeah. If everybody else is 90 and yours is 50, that's a great problem. You just need to know why. Is it because they put a new road in, nobody can get to it anymore? I don't know. Is it because poor management? If poor management is a problem, you want to buy that one. That's the best one, is bad management, because I can fix that. They don't have a website. They don't do tenant insurance and never rate increases. Man, we love that story because those are all fixable things. You can't fix a lot of things, but you can fix those things. So before I undo this, anybody questions on a feasibility study?
There's a question in the chat that Jeff has. It says, do you believe it's also risky to be developing climate controlled? Also, knowing there are a ton of variables, what is your rough cost per square foot or net rentable square foot to develop climate control?
Yeah, so is it risky to climate control? In a market where the incomes are low and nobody else has it, it could be. So really, every market is different. We do, for example, you can go to some markets where there's no premium for climate. Everybody, if a 10 by 10 non-climate's 80 and a climate's also 80, then I wouldn't, because you got to have a premium, because there's two reasons why you have a 30 to 40% premium on climate at a minimum. One is cost. It's going to cost more to build, right? You got a HVAC systems, you got to sprinkle the building probably, you got a lot of things involved. Two is, an even bigger expense is, you only get a 75% efficiency. If I build 10,000 square feet of non-climate space, then I've got 10,000 square feet of rentable space. But if I build 10,000 square feet of climate space, I only got 7,500 square feet of rentable space. So it matters what you build from that standpoint. So is it risky to build climate? It might be. There's really no rhyme or reason to it, except that, is there a premium for the rates? And so in that case, right now, probably over half the facilities being built in the United States are climate control, at least a component of it, because people expect it. They see it as more new. I would tell you 90% of people who use climate don't need it. They think they do. And so let's build it. They think they knew it. So it comes down to, is there a premium enough for it to build climate? It's not necessarily based at all on climate or not. Is there a premium for it, and does the market warrant climate, or does the market warrant building climate?
And what is so right now, what is that cost difference between building non-climate and climate control? Like, what's the cost difference per square foot?
You can build basic non-climate today, not including the land. When I say basic, no gingerbread, just basic metal buildings, if they'll let you get by with it. Probably something in the 50s 60 at the most. I mean, if you don't have to do a lot and you can get by without much, you can probably do that range. Climate's going to be probably more in the 70 to 80 range. I built a facility that I'm telling you earlier, I built a brand new 70-some thousand square facility in Birmingham. That was half climate, half not. That I sold then put an office in it and sold it to public storage at CO, and it was about $85 a foot because they had a lot of site work. I've seen them built for 50. I've seen them built for 150. So, but in general, it's going to be in that 60 to 80 range for a lot of facilities. Obviously, multi-story is going to be higher because you got elevators considered and all that. But 60 to 80 is a pretty good budget for most projects, single story.
And that's not including the land. So you do
That's not the land, right?
Yeah.
The land, and sometimes that's the issue. I've done projects where somebody wanted to build 20,000 square feet on a $2 million piece of property. That's impossible. That can't support it. So the value of the land should not be more than 25-30% of the total value of the project, because if it is, that's probably not the highest best use of that property.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Well, hey, appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk about your remote property management.
Yeah.
Well, actually, first, before we get to that, how can, if someone needs a feasibility study from you, how can they reach you? Your website, email?
Bob at selfstorage101.com. I try to keep it as easy as possible.
All right, I'll put that in the chat. Bob at selfstorage101.com.
You got it.
Got it. Okay. Now, getting over into remote property management, can you talk about what you guys offer,
Sure.
Copper self-storage management? Because like I was saying, you guys were, and let me share the website with the team. This is copperstoragemanagement.com. Bob and his group, they're one of the first ones that I saw doing third-party management for unmanned remote managed sites. So, Bob, can you talk about some of the things that you guys offer? And
Sure. Well, I owned facilities years ago in the early 2000s, traditional legacy properties, on-site manager's office and all that. And I learned really quickly that I like to own them way better than I like managing them. The drama, the turnover, the deal with customers not showing up, or employees showing up. So I sold them after a couple of years and didn't do anything for a few years. And then my son, who graduated from college and then went to work for CubeSmart for a while to make sure he had a real job for a while and show up every day. So I wouldn't let him work for me for a little while. Did a great job, and he got great training at CubeSmart. When he finally comes on board, he says, "We need to buy some self-storage property." I said, "Nope, I'm not doing it, not having managers." And we talked about it. Well, how about if we do them without managers? I said, "Well, let's figure that out." And so we did. We bought and built, I don't know, 30 or 40 of properties over the years. We've got 29 now. We sold about 40 or 50, and then we bought more. And so it has come to the conclusion of us, and frankly, people smarter than us, that the idea of an on-site manager sitting there all day is gotten kind of out of date, kind of old-fashioned, because if you think about technology, you think about customer expectations, the idea of having them sit there all day, on the off chance they might rent a unit, because that's really the only reason they need to sit there, because everything else is automated. We've gotten where we just don't need to do it. We find that when you have on-site managers, you have a jack of all trades, right? They have to know how to rent units, take payments, sell units at auction, clean the toilets, pick up cigarette butts. And a jack of all trades always means you suck at everything. You're not a specialist, right? Well, in our system, everybody specializes. We have a boots on the ground person at every one of our 100 and some properties that goes by, picks up the trash, gets units ready to rent again, but they don't interact with customers. We have a call center, our own in-house call center, that does all that interaction. They're way better at it. Think about it. A typical self-storage manager might talk to 1 or 2 people a day to rent a unit. Our call center just talk to 50 people a day because we get 50,000 calls a month. And so they're just going to be better at it, that somebody does something all the time. And so we do that. We get much better reviews that way. We get really kind of everything better. Man, that's a terrible picture. I've lost some weight since then, Brand. I need to get you a new picture.
It's on your website.
I gotta get them to fix that. Yeah, the GLP shots have done really magic for me. But anyway, so the remote part, it's made a couple things happen. One is it's made properties that might have otherwise been iffy, right? If you do iffy and you're going to have things that are borderline with payroll, Now all of a sudden they make sense with no payroll because that's your biggest expense usually, other than property taxes. So that's made properties much less risky. It's made properties work better, and we can manage properties anywhere. I mean, a lot of the management companies out there, they can manage a property for you if they have other assets in the area, right? To manage it. In our case, if you call and you got one property in the middle of nowhere, we'll manage it because we're going to hire a local boots on the ground person, which is our lowest turnover employees. 95% of our boots on the ground people stay year after year because they're usually retired people. They're on Social Security. They can't make too much anyway. They usually need some beer and cigarette money. They're 1099 employees. They don't have any benefits. They usually own their own tools or handy. Their wife wants them out of the house anyway, and they're fantastic. So that's how we manage our properties. They stay clean. They stay, built. They stay well maintained. And so all of our rentals, management, everything's done through a call center. Now, that being said, there have always been unmanned facilities since storage started in the 70s. There's always been properties that nobody worked at, usually remote, out in the middle of nowhere. Somebody stick a sign on the fence that said, "Call me, I'll rent you a unit." And those facilities, frankly, still exist. I'm surprised they still exist, but they do. But today, with technology, you walk up to any of our facilities, you just point your phone at a QR code and move in. Everything's on your phone. Everybody's got a kiosk now. We don't use kiosk anymore because everybody can do it with a phone. They sign their lease and do everything with their phone. Makes it so much easier. The property, I told you we built a 85,000 square foot facility in Panama City. We leased it up in about 9 months, sold it to one of the big REITs out there. And my call center manager, he called me one day and said, "We leased that property up." He said, "Over 90% of customers there, we never interacted with at all. They did it all themselves. Used our QR code, used the web. We didn't talk to them on the phone. They did it all remotely." And frankly, if you look at the current demand analysis from the self-storage industry, the number one users of self-storage right now are millennials, believe it or not. I thought they were too stupid to use storage, but apparently they use storage. Both of my kids are millennials, so I can say that. But they're the biggest users. Well, millennials, you talk to them, they don't want to talk to people. They don't want to interact with people. They want to do it with their phone. They want to be in line. They want to get in there and get out. We still do a lot of acquisition work. But besides feasibility studies, we do a ton of acquisition work, people buying existing facilities. We just did one with one of our big REIT customers buying 10 facilities out west. We did all those for them. And going to a self-storage property today and interacting with an on-site manager is a miserable experience. It takes forever to rent a unit. It's like buying a house. They're answering the phone while they're trying to help you and stuff, and it's just miserable. And so, give you an example. We managed a property in Tuscaloosa, where the University of Alabama is. In May, they rented 100 units in 2 days. Wow. An on-site manager could have never done that, but our automation did. Because it's just so much more efficient. And so, to me, the biggest mistake people make, Brandon, on remote management is they try to nickel and dime it too much. For example, I told you this morning, we were looking at a facility that's underperforming, that somebody's trying to peddle to us and all that. And I call the website, I call the phone number to shop them on the phone, and the guy's wife answers the phone on her cell phone while she's in line at the bank. Yeah. That is not a way to run a self-storage property when a call center environment is so inexpensive today. Why would you risk $1 million self-storage property to your cell phone or an answer machine? You shouldn't even have an answer machine in self-storage properties anymore. So if you're going to run a self-storage property remotely, which I think they should all be run remote, we've got them with 1,000 units with no managers or offices. You should at least have a professional call center who can rent units, take payments, do all that for you. Because if you're willing to risk your business to a cell phone, you should probably get out of the self-storage business. It's too big of a business. We're bigger than the NFL. We're bigger than the motion picture industry. And we've got to get away from being such a mom and pop business. We're too big for that. And it's the difference, Brandon, between mom and pop unprofessional and professional is about that big. It's not a big stretch to be professional. It's just we won't do it. We won't use call center, which is stupid. Our websites are terrible if we have a website. Websites, besides call center, your website is your number one door to your facility now. It should be professional, but designed by self-storage people. If your website was designed by your grandkids, you're already doing it wrong because you want to save $50. Get a decent website that people can rent units, take payments, get all the pictures off there of your kids and your grandkids and your puppy. Nobody cares. If puppies and clubs you belong to matter to, wouldn't Extra Space and CubeSmart do that? They don't. The biggest companies in the world that do we do things a certain way. They're smarter than us. Just do that. All of them use call centers. All of them have great websites, all of which we as individuals can do. And yet I see so many operators out there. I did a feasibility study the other day. There were 10 competitors in a market. 7 of them didn't have websites. I can't fathom how you do that. And so have a good website, get a good boots on the ground person, and make sure somebody's answering the phone that is professional, well-spoken, speaks good English, and knows how to rent a unit to somebody and knows how to get Google reviews. My son, it took him a while to convince me the Google reviews are the #1 thing we've got to get. I don't know that I've ever used a Google review. I'm in my 60s, so maybe that's not a big deal to me, but apparently to you guys and you young folks. So, I mean, we get hundreds of Google reviews regularly, and they're all 4.5 and higher. You got to make sure you have a system in place because one bad Google review will ruin your business. Apparently, I've heard that. And so don't take that for granted. So great website, great customer service from a call center environment, and make sure you get good Google reviews. And you can make really any facility of any size work successfully.
What else do you think is needed? So you mentioned the call center, the website for remote unmanned facilities. So the call center, website, good boots on the ground, Google,
and some good signage. People ask us all the time how expensive it is to take a property that isn't remotely managed and convert it over to remotely managed. Less than $1,000, because in our case, we have like a sign package we get for our facilities that basically has a sign with the name on it, the website, phone number, and a QR code some.
Yep.
And if you got that, you're in business. Now you can do other things. For example, we've got some big facilities with multiple stories and internal space. We just get a bunch of "You are here" signs. You get your facility that you had made by your architect and put "You are here" signs, so you know people know where they are. Somebody asked me last year sometime, Brandon, we were in a multi-story building in Vegas at the convention, and I'll tell them about what we do. I said, well, yeah, without a manager there, how do people find their storage unit? I said, how'd you find your room in the hotel? Nobody walked you up here. There's signs that say rooms 100 to 110 or that way and that. We don't do any different. So extra signage. We do not do kiosks. We think those are a waste of money. The evidence shows people don't use them even if you have one. I've had people offer to give me their kiosk for free because they're tired of paying $500 a month for it because nobody's using it. Everybody has a kiosk now. My 14-year-old grandson has a kiosk in his pocket, so you don't need that. We also are not believers in the smart lock technology like the no key stuff.
Like Da Vinci
no knock on them, but we've got to have systems in place in our environment where everything works 100% of the time, and they don't. We actually use Da Vinci locks that are manual locks that our people put on when they're late, and the system automatically gives them a code to get it off themselves and put a lockbox. Works every time. So we don't use those because that's just something that doesn't work all the time. You can imagine my parents who are almost 90 go to their storage unit, can't get their Bluetooth to work, they can't get their unit. And we just aren't going to risk that. And so, and that's the thing about, I think people get caught up in about going to remote management is they think it's going to be expensive from a technology standpoint. There is no technology. It's the same cameras. Everything's the same, except you don't need a computer on site, right? None of our facilities, hardly any of our facilities even have internet to site because they don't have computers. The only reason you need internet is if you want to look at the cameras every day. I don't.
Or if you have a gate. Or if you have like a gate.
You have a gate. But right now, a lot of our facilities, we use all spider door units. Most of our keypads run off cell towers now. I don't need internet to keep it for those either. So we can run them expensively. A lot of facilities we bought, Brandon, or managed have offices. We've turned that office into rentable space. We rent that office to a local insurance agent or somebody who just needs a small office. If they have an apartment, we rent that apartment to people. So we've actually created even more rentable space and don't let them sit empty. I don't want an office sitting there just empty. I want something in there. And so we'll let a small business who just needs an office and not a lot of parking, we let them do that. We actually have rental trucks at a lot of our facilities. U-Haul, like a lot of the people.
I have a question about that. I'll let you finish. I have a question about that.
Like a lot of vendors in our industry are glomming onto the whole remote management thing. U-Haul has a thing called 24/7. They put trucks in your facility, they put lock boxes on your wall, and they rent trucks to people without anybody being there. So we can even rent trucks from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah, I've ran into some trouble. I mean, maybe I'm just not doing it right with the U-Haul to where I know some reason the folks that were renting, and we have the box, the black for the return and the orange for
Oh,
the
sure.
pickup. Uh, but for some reason, the folks still needed to have my boots on the ground person come and sign off on something.
In our case, and some of that, Brandon, depends on your local U-Haul rep. Some are
Okay,
very
okay,
good and some are very bad. And so it really depends on your rep. In our case, all our boots on the ground people have to do is sometimes move the truck and repark it because
right,
it's badly parked. But other than that, we
okay,
don't do anything.
all right. Well, I got to
I
figure it
think
out.
I think part of it is because our local rep, Brandon, he sees one being checked in. He does that part. We don't do it. Now it's
Okay,
good. We've had U-Haul at some facilities. We took it out because the local rep was so bad we didn't do it. So it really depends on the rep.
okay,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got you. All right.
But now keep in mind, the only reason you have rental trucks is not to make money, it's to
No,
rent more storage
draw
units. You don't
people.
make
Yeah.
you hardly make any money off trucks, but I like having those trucks parked out there. It lets people know something's going on here. And so we kind of like that.
Yeah, and then it's more U-Haul advertises you on their website too, so it's more visibility online
They
as
do.
well.
Absolutely. They sure do. Yeah.
Question for you got time for two or three more questions, Bob?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
All right. So KK has a question. Any thoughts on the Storage Defender Smart Unit product for detecting break-ins? I've never
Yeah,
used Defender.
we do have that at some of our facilities. They're a pretty good product. In a lot of the cases where we have them, Brandon, we charge extra for it if the customer wants it. It's not on every
Okay.
unit. We add an add-on for $10 a month or whatever they charge for it. So I mean, we do have some of those, yeah. And what it does is Storage Defender is an alarm that goes on the unit that alerts the customer if somebody got in the unit. It doesn't alert us. It
Right.
alerts the customer, hey, somebody just opened your door. They're not, they want to pay extra $10. We don't mind that. We have some that do that, yeah.
Okay. I
But
got
it's
you.
a one that sticks on the door. It's not like a no key lock you got to install. It just sticks on the door.
Right. 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 Got it. Okay. Um, two more questions. So, is there a site, or do you ever come across a site where, you know what, remote storage just will not work at this particular site, and we need someone on site full time? Like, for example, what I've seen is in certain cities where, okay, you have more, like if you're in some of the major cities where you have more crime, usually if you have someone on site, that kind of deters some of the criminals.
Right.
Or if a site is just too big to where, man, you need someone there every day. Is there a site where it just doesn't work for remote
The,
management?
the only ones we've seen, and I think I don't think it's forever. I think it's just getting used to this. We looked at some properties for people in like right in Manhattan
Yes.
that have such activity, such in and out, tons of lockers, and they asked us to look at doing a remote, and we said no because we don't think today that's a great fit. And part of it is because now, if I was opening a brand new facility in Manhattan, I probably would do it. But to take over one that's been there for 20 years and has a certain
Yeah.
already expectation,
Yeah.
it'd be very tough. The other places that it makes it tough to work is if you're in a market where such a high percentage of people pay cash and will only pay cash,
Yeah.
it makes it tough because we don't accept cash. When we take over a property, we have to wean people off the cash and checks. We only take credit cards. And surprisingly, most people have one, so it's never
Yeah.
been a big deal. But there are markets specifically that are much higher prone to cash, that if you no longer took cash, it could harm your business. Now, there are ways to get around that. For example, we got properties, they put in those reverse ATM cards where somebody walks up, they can put $100 in cash and it spits out an ATM card or a credit card they can then pay their bill with. So there are ways around
Wow.
it. They're
How,
called
how, how
reverse
much was that?
ATM.
How much was that to install?
It's a vendor machine you buy that charges so much people use it. It's like getting a Coke machine.
Okay.
Yeah, called reverse ATMs, and you can Google them. They're used in a lot of businesses because more and more businesses now don't take cash for anything. You go to most like a football stadium,
Right.
no cash is allowed. You go to a lot of business now, but you got to have a system in place where people can convert their cash into a card. So it's kind of a common thing. But we only have it in a few places because most places you find Most people have a debit card, or they can do ACH, or they have a credit card. So it's very little, because that's one of the ones we've seen. The other ones we've seen is we've had people that wanted us to take over remote management of their property. They had a lot of boat and RV parking that was not well numbered and wasn't delineated. It's just, well, the manager knows Joe parks over there. You can't run a property that way. First of all, you shouldn't run a property that way anyway.
Right.
But you got to make sure every parking. Now we do a lot of boat and RV parking because the space is numbered and we know that that car goes in that space. It's easy. But if it's just a wild west out there, then we can't. We're not going to take that responsibility on. Keep in mind, all of our and why I think it's so important to use a good call center in this business is your call center will have the agent has in front of them maps of your property. They tells people, hey, when you pull in, make a right, and you can get to your unit. They're it's like they're there. They're that good. Where again, your wife on a cell phone at the bank can't do all that. And so I'm surprised some people would be so cheap they would run their business that way. And none of us could afford, especially today, we were talking about earlier about the market we're in.
Yeah.
None of us could afford to miss a rental.
No.
So why risk it to a cell phone or even we don't even have, you shouldn't even have answer machines in your facilities anymore because people will not leave a message. The industry has proven that if people leave a message for a unit, by the time you call them, they've already moved on to somebody else.
Yep.
They need a unit right now.
Yep.
And got to answer the phone right now. That's why you got to use a call center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Bob, man, it's been a pleasure. You're a wealth of information and knowledge, and we definitely have to have you back on again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Any
Good talking.
anyone got any last questions before we end? Any questions for Bob? You guys can reach him again. His website, selfstorage101.com. That's for the consulting business and for the feasibility studies. And then copperstoragemanagement.com if you're looking for third-party management, hybrid management. Yeah, contact them. Any questions? No. All right. Well, hey, Bob, appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And yeah, I'll probably see you in Vegas in about a month and a half.
I'll be there. See you guys.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right. So, hey, guys, if you guys, I'm gonna stay on for a couple more minutes in case anybody has questions or you guys got some deals that you want to talk about. Otherwise, next week we will not be meeting on Wednesday because we have our capital raising event on Thursday. Let me share my screen with you so you can see this. So we have Fernando Angelucci from Self Storage Syndicated Equities. He's a individual that has raised tens of millions of dollars through syndications and partnerships and joint ventures. He's going to host a 3-hour workshop where he's going to talk about different ways that we can raise capital for self-storage purchases, from friends and family to people on Facebook and the private market, all the way up to institutional capital. So that's going to be a 3-hour workshop. If you are someone that is looking for some advice or some tips on how you can raise money to purchase deals, that's going to be a great workshop to attend, and it is completely free. And that's going to be next Thursday. We're going to start at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific, and we're going to end at 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific. So, any questions on that? Yeah, they're in the chat. We have the event calendar, so go and register because it is limited space, and we want to know who's coming. So if you guys want to attend, go to our website, selfstorageinvestmentclub.com. Go here to event calendar. Come right down here, and you can click the link to join the and register for the event. Other than that, I'll see you guys next week. Again, no meeting on Wednesday, but we will be here on Thursday at 10 o'clock. And I will stick around for a couple minutes if any of you guys have questions or you want to talk about some deals. Rest of you guys, see you next week. Oh yeah, YouTube also. I keep forgetting about promote our YouTube. We have a YouTube channel at Self Storage Investment Club on YouTube, where you can go back and watch any of the replays from any of the speakers that we've had on the club this year. So if you ever miss any speaker, just go on to you can go to our YouTube channel at Self Storage Investment Club on YouTube and look up any of the speakers that we've had.